Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Got a great stream for you here, rounding up the news of the week as we often do. And I've got my co-host here, American Ostrakon, who once again is joining us. Thank you, sir.
As always, Auron, it is a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So we've got a number of different things this week. We've got a little bit of Elon Musk news. We've got a little bit of law news with the Supreme Court here. We've got a little bit going on with, of course, elections. And then I want to talk also about the curious case of Paul Pelosi and the amazing disappearing kind of news coverage and how that's happened in real time. So, got a couple different things to look at this week, but let's go ahead and start with affirmative action. So, for those who don't know, the Supreme Court has been addressing this week. We've had this case is built up over a long time. It's the affirmative action case with Harvard University and their discrimination towards Asian American students based on admittance. Right, SAT scores. It's long been known that if you are of one race, you need a much higher SAT score to enter than another. And of course, the reason that I think the Harvard case, the affirmative action case in these universities, has really taken up is that while it's obvious that there are certain races that are advantaged when it comes to admittance, and there are some that are disadvantaged, it's very odd for the left's narrative when it comes to Asian Americans, right? If white people are not allowed, or if white students are not admitted due to their race, that can fit into the narrative of affirmative action. You have to hold back certain number of students because there's been systemic racism, and you have to make up for the historic injustice. And yes, that does mean holding some back to elevate others, right? Like, I think that's gross. I think this is a gross story, and it doesn't really fit with a lot of, I think, what a lot of people understand is kind of this meritocracy that they're told America rests on. But that is a narrative that justifies a lot of affirmative action in our society. But the problem, of course, is if that turns towards Asian Americans, that doesn't fit as easily, right? And it's very drastic with Asian Americans. They particularly have to have a significantly higher score than everyone else, including whites, to get into these universities, because they've just come to dominate the admittance standards so much, or at least the standardized test portion of those admittance standards. And so it really just highlights the ridiculous nature of what's going on here. And so we see a lot of arguing in the Supreme Court because there's a very awkward case to be made, right? It's very clear that these universities want to use race as a standard, but they have to avoid directly saying we choose people directly based on race. And so they have to keep using these very awkward and circular arguments where they say, well, we're not really evaluating students on race, but we do need to use race in order to they actually, I think the phrase the Harvard lawyer or the representative was using was, we need to have racially blind understanding of race. I wish I should have had the exact. It's such a ridiculous way of phrasing it. It's basically, we need to have a race. Oh, that's it. It was a race neutral approach towards diversity. It's like, it's okay. What does that mean? Like, what does a race neutral approach to diversity even look like? How do you even judge the diversity of a class or a college or people entering into your university if you're not going to evaluate on race? So it's a situation where it's very obvious what's being done. It's very obvious why it's being done, but they have to generate a completely ridiculous kind of lexicon of terms and double speak in order to kind of weave it around the standards, because it's awkward this time, because it's people who aren't supposed to be oppressed. It's a theoretical minority that isn't supposed to be subject to the downsides of affirmative action. are the ones who are, in this case, the greatest statistical not percentage wise, but the ones who are carrying the heaviest burden in this kind of bias, and that really breaks the normal narrative, and they can't use the normal language and rhetoric that they're used to around the subject.
Sure, if they were, if they were Irish or if they were Italian or if they were Greek, they could just get away with calling them white,
Right.
and they could just fall in that category. But because they're Asian, they're having a harder time justifying this built-in racial prejudice.
Well, and as my Italian friends, like Gio Pinchetti have let me know, Italians are most definitely people of color, so that's very offensive to them, and their heritage.
Right.
To be,
Well, they can't lump them in with the rest of
yes,
of white people, and so they're having to play these mental gymnastics to try and justify why people who are grossly less qualified to be admitted entry into the school are being allowed entry. Well,
and
why do we need diversity when it comes to a meritocracy? Isn't that the whole point of a meritocracy? Is just, I know I'm really softballing it in here.
yeah, I appreciate that. That's why you're such a good co-host there.
But like, if it is a meritocracy as they claim it to be, then why would we care at all what the color of the skin of the people that go to school there are? Would you not only want the best regardless of background?
Well, and this is of course the classic conservative argument, and a fair one along the lines of the rules that have been set before them, right? Like
Correct.
if we are creating a frame where America is a meritocracy and only the best should rise to, then what are these artificial constraints? The only problem for most conservatives is that argument has become most popular in a time frame where affirmative action has always been under effect, right? So the weird thing is that this argument among conservatives has come to prominence as it has been legally, it has been put into the legal code that they can be discriminated against, and that meritocracy is actually not the primary factor. So it's weird, even though that's a very logical outgrowth of kind of the argument and the frame that's been made, it's actually just never been true during almost the entirety of the time it's been used by conservatives, right? And so what's interesting too has been the attempts to make Asian Americans white adjacent. I'm sure you've seen this, right?
Of
Where
course.
people, they'll say, well, they're basically white, and so like the rules of minor, they're too successful, right? Because their minority status does not explain a statistical failure, and so therefore they're not really people of color. They actually are somehow, fall under the same banner as kind of white people, even though they're not, and they would say they're not, and they would say specifically that they should belong to the other coalition, but they're pushed out because too successful doesn't fit the narrative again.
Yep. And this, what it really boils down to is it's anti middle class and then anti upper middle class. It's either you're elite or you're oppressed, and their viewpoints are not going to support a healthy middle class. It's the kulaks. It's all it is.
That's right.
Right. These are obviously, I would argue, upper middle class, right? If you're going and getting accepted into Harvard, you are not.
You're upper class or upper middle class. You are certainly, yeah.
Right, but you're not elite, right? You're not necessarily part of the elite structure of the United States.
I think you're going to be. I think that's what Harvard is.
It's a pipeline to that.
That's right. Yeah, that's the right way to see it, right? Like, so that's an interesting thing we can talk about for a second. So one of the things for kind of our circulation of elites that our system does is it hoovers up the kind of cream of all the other classes and gives them the opportunity, right? That's the theory. Rather than focus on groups, we're focused on the individual, right? And so the individual can rise above their neighborhood or above their class or above whatever, and they can enter into the hallowed halls of something like Harvard, which is basically just finishing school for the ruling elites, right? Like you're supposed to, in theory, take the best of the best, pick them up from wherever they are in the middle of Iowa or whatever, and you place them into Harvard, and now they can become CEOs or presidents or senators or run an NGO or something, right? Become high tier journalists, whatever.
Sure, you've got your Ivy League schools is one pipeline into the elite. I would argue that the military academies are another pipeline into sort of the elite. It is. I mean, it's the either you're going into the bureaucracy of the United States. I guess if you want to go into media, like that would be like what UCLA is like would be your school of choice.
Sure. I mean, there's a number of different schools. Obviously, you have Yale, you have all these other Brown, you have these schools. There are multiple places to feed into the elite, but we all know the 6, 7, 8 schools that are going to guarantee you a decent spot at most places, most elite
Right.
institutions.
It's Harvard, it's Yale, it's maybe like I guess Brown. That's always the butt of everyone's jokes, right? But sure, it's the Ivy League schools plus some of the schools out in California as well. Like these are your avenues into politics and tech and into media, or sorry to keep bringing up my particular background on this, but like obviously you got the military academies as well, which is
Mhm.
the lesser avenue of a lever of power, but very much still one of the levers of power, which I always found strange that the hard power is the least sought after, if you know what I mean.
Well,
That's
let's
always
talk
very
about that.
that's very interesting to me that you
Yeah.
think there would be more of an invested interest in the hard power.
Well, I think we should stop to talk about that because I think that is an interesting avenue that doesn't get talked about enough. So, yeah, it obviously in a situation where you are kind of doing this meritocracy and you're trying to put people into like finishing schools for leadership and the elite class, you would think, like you're saying, that the military would be a top tier posting, right? And to be clear, through a lot of American history it was, right? Like you needed to have military experience to be a president, or it was very often sought after, right? Like you have guys like Teddy Roosevelt who were kind of like a soft upper class well-bred city guy who specifically like resigned his post as assistant secretary of the Navy to like go into a battlefield so he could have that on his record, right? So there was a time when this was very important, as it and we can see this over and over again. This is a historical cycle thing, right? Generals start as your leaders, right? George Washington, right? Like and Andrew Jackson, right?
Right.
These are your leaders because these are lions, right? These are your
Sure.
patriotic. These are your guys who are very competent in matters of command and violence, which are necessities when you're like freeing yourself from another power and carving, a country out of the land and the wilderness. These are the
Y-
guys you want.
you can't disassociate your hard power from your leadership.
You can't early on, right?
Not early on.
But what happens is over time we see the shift to the foxes, right? The foxes, they're more interested in combinations, complexity, ideas outside. And it's not that foxes are like evil inherently. Like you need foxes. You always want a mix of lions and foxes, ideally. And you need these type 2 residues. You need these foxes to solve complex problems. And as your society gets more complex and as you become more secure in your physical safety and your problems tend to be more monetary market, sociological, and less we got to kill the guys next to us or they're going to kill us, you start leaning more and more on fox power, right? And it's gotten to the point now where we're entirely fox power and we're no lions, right? The starting with guys like Woodrow Wilson, you have the professor class becoming president, right? You got guys like Obama, right? The scholars are the ones who are now in charge. When's the last time you had a general as a president, right? And so
Yeah, or even like any sort of president with a
significant
modicum of
military background.
some sort of significant military background.
Right. And so why do you want this, right? Why would they steer the ruling elites away from military service? Well, a number of reasons. One is you want a weak castle. You want a weak military if you're an oligarchy, right? Because the natural enemy of foxes who fail, the natural enemy of an oligarchy is a strong military, right? Anytime you ever see this kind of decadent, weak, kind of overstretched, incompetent, oligarchical class controlling, the thing that always brings it to their end is a strong military leader. So you want, obviously, and that's the trick, right? Is like you only get to this point if you think you're so secure that it's more dangerous to have a strong military internally than it is to have a weak military externally, right? So they think that America is in such a secure place that they can purposely make the military weak and ineffectual and funnel the best minds out of those avenues of power, and they'll keep themselves safe from a strong military rule, possibly kind of taking over, and not suffer the consequences of a weak military abroad, right? Like
Sure.
that's the assumption there. But of course, we both know eventually that cost comes due, right?
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's part of why they're, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but that's part of the reason why they're now focusing so heavily on the the education system for the military,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Absolutely.
and and how it's become, it was, again, we've talked about this. It's always been a lesser lever of power in the United States, but it's one that's always been more conservative, inherently more conservative, and they are even stripping away an option, a valid option, for there to be more conservative elites at the table by in essence reorganizing and reprogramming or deprogramming the United States military.
No, 100%. And it's a shame, right? Because
You're
what you end up
you're
having.
shutting off the pressure valves, as we said before.
Yeah, and you're also taking what you're doing is you're creating a serious problem because you're taking guys who, like, the martial class is real, whether you think you live in a safe, secure, modern society or not. The martial
Every
class is
society
real.
has one.
That's right. And if you are taking guys who would naturally be part of the elite in the martial class and you are denying them a real avenue to participate in the upper echelon of your society, you're creating a resentful, disorganized, disaffected underclass of possible elites. And those people don't just sit at home, right? Like eventually, those people start looking for ways that they can take part, and that's how you get an actual rotation of the elites, right? That's how you actually see that when you
Sure.
see that build up over time. It's something, it's a very foolish thing to do, right? Pareto talks about this, how dangerous it is to have to not have that avenue, to not have that ability of those people to travel between the elites, because if you don't, then they build up, they become resentful, and they look for other ways to do things. And so, again, very dangerous, very much foolish. But if anyone's wondering why is the military not, an avenue for elite power like it you think it would be, that's why. But that said, we were on affirmative action. But I guess we talked
Yeah.
mostly
back to
about.
back to the other topic.
Right, back to the topic we were actually talking about. But I think we got to most
Well, they are
of
they
that.
are interlinked. It's
Sure.
shutting. No, it's the production of a it's the production of elites and controlling the production of elites.
Hmm. It is, and it's also, and this is true when it comes to kind of your warrior caste with the military, and it's also true, unfortunately, in the United States due to race, because the left have made a coalition that is based on telling people you need us to elevate you in the society, and their power comes from artificially elevating those people through programs like affirmative action. And the narrative is, well, it's okay to do this because these groups have been historically put upon, and the people who are being now held down by affirmative actions are the ones responsible, so this is all justified. But again, that's why this all falls apart when it's targeted at Asian Americans. It's not that Asian Americans are the only victims of affirmative action. Far from it. Numerically, that they're not even the most targeted, of course, but they are. It's in the specific instance. Let's just be honest. Asian Americans are crushing standardized test scores, and they're dominating so heavily that it becomes very apparent when they're being adjusted out of the population of these universities. And the arguments that they're trying to make, the arguments that the universities are attempting to make about having to keep a university with a certain level of diversity, while also being, not saying you don't use race, is insane. But as Ostrakon also brought up, it also brings up the question, is this even a meritocracy at this point? Like, don't you just have a system of racial percentages? Like, isn't your system doesn't have anything to do with merit, and it has everything to do with reaching racial quotas, which means you're really just South Africa at that point, right? Like, you're really just saying, well, central planning has decided we need X number of people of each race in the ruling class, so it doesn't really matter how good they are at it. If we need X number of people and you're not one of them, then you're just on the outs. And it doesn't really matter how well you perform or how intelligent you are or how skilled you are at, say, things like the military. We don't really like your kind in around these parts, and so we're going to limit the number who are allowed to enter the system that eventually credentials people to be part of the ruling class. But that said, our next story here is gonna. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Didn't know if I had a bit of
No,
lag there.
it's yes. Like this. There's really not much more. I think we've
Beat
chunked
that one to
this
death.
subject.
Fair enough. All right, so our next subject is going to be.
It's.
Sorry, I think we're rubber banding. Like, I think I got a little bit of lag, so that's why we're talking at weird times.
Yep, I think so too.
Sorry about that, guys. New internet is coming in 2 days, so I'm sorry that my streams have been a little robot-y, a little bit of lag. Hopefully, you will be able to tell a big difference here in just a few days. That solution is coming, so just bear with me. I'm sorry about the pardon our dust as we remodel here. But the next story I wanted to hit on is Elon Musk. I know talked about this and kind of did a reaction stream last week, so don't want to belabor, don't want to make this all about Twitter, but it is very important with the current election coming up, because we're going to kind of talk about 3 stories now in succession, and they're all going to be tied to the upcoming election and the impact of those stories on what's coming next. So obviously Elon takes over. Lot of controversy on Twitter. Is he going to completely change everything? He's promised free speech. What kind of steps is he going to take? And we had all the, I had Pete Quinones, and I had Ryan Turnipseed, and I had who's my last person? Sorry, other person I've suddenly forgotten who joined us for that stream. But we had all were reacting to these changes and making predictions on what was going to happen. And one thing that Ryan said, and it was echoed by everybody, I think, was look at the people Elon surrounds himself with. Will he be able to kind of gut the infrastructure? Will he put his own people in place? Will he be willing to kind of get rid of most of what was existing at Twitter that was unfairly censoring and put his own people in place? Or will he just try to look to make a few changes here or there and then end up falling under the sway of these people? That was kind of the debate that was going on. And so originally at the beginning of this week, it looked like Elon was going to kind of cave, right? He came out and turned out he hadn't changed any of the any of the rules for moderation yet. A lot of people went on there and said all kinds of crazy stuff thinking the rules had changed, and they didn't, and then they got banned. So it was already a lot of people who were shocked thinking that the rules had changed fundamentally, and they hadn't. And then Elon brings out his new like safety council, and the safety council is full of all the people you'd expect. It's got all the advisors of, you know, the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center and all these, you know, mainstream fact check hate group, you know, just all the people who have made it basically impossible to have any opinions that weren't approved by the New York Times on Twitter. And it's like, okay, well, it looks like we know what Elon's doing. He's bringing back all the people who made Twitter terrible. He's co-signing all these people. Looks real bad, right? Then a few days later, we find out that all these different advertisers, and this has already started, right? It started as soon as Elon had announced the finalization of the deal, but all these different advertisers were pulling their ads. They were saying, okay, we're done here. We're going to pause our investment in the platform until we actually, you know, we figure out what's going on. And it only intensified, right, as kind of the hyperbole over what was going to happen. You know, Elon was going around, everyone running around shouting the most insane things ever, and threatening people, whatever. Like as the kind of just fever pitch of, you know, liberal freak out really hit its maximum, you saw a lot of companies following suit and saying, we're going to pull all this stuff. And a lot of them were doing this because many of the organizations that were being placed onto the council were specifically telling them to. So these people who were going to be advising Elon Musk on what should go on Twitter were on the other side going around and telling people, well, don't invest in this guy until we basically have complete control of Twitter again. And then Musk came out here recently and he said, you know what? Don't need to work with these people anyway. It's very obvious that no matter what I do, if I bow, you know, to these people, they're just going to they're going to badmouth me and they're going to destroy me anyway. And they're going to have people pull their ads. So you know what? Forget them. I don't need to worry about that. And he actually fires a large amount of the monitoring teams, like a lot of the kind of these woke institutions inside Twitter, these different councils. He fires the people who are charged with monitoring a bunch of this stuff, and kind of guts a lot of the things that we were talking about. And so I'm not sure that one of the reasons I put this in the thumbnail is, was this 4D chess? Like, was Elon Musk the whole time planning to get rid of these guys anyway? And he just do a whole dog and pony show of bringing all of these groups out and saying he was including them and listening to them, just so he could eventually show that they were going to like publicly backstab him, and then he could make like a show of being convinced that he needed to drop them? It felt a lot like Caesar, refusing the crown 3 times. No, I was never interested in this. I was never interested, but then it was forced upon me and I had no choice, right?
My guess, it was probably a genuine, like, he's a businessman first. So he's going to be focused on what makes his company profitable. And why would you worry about political commissars in your company making your company profitable? In what way do these people help make your company profitable? It's paying lip service to the regime, but like, these people are not useful. Like, this is what's being filtered through Harvard and Yale right now due to affirmative action. Like, these are the literally, these are the people with feminine degrees in feminist study and, degrees in political science.
Who would get a degree in that?
Yeah, exactly.
What kind of useless people would go to university for that kind of education?
Don't feel bad. Mine was quite useless as well. Criminology, not particularly useful.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's like, why am I paying you to badmouth me? Like, what's the point?
Sure.
Like, it's, you work for me and you're sitting there just telling, directly working against me and what I want to do at my company. Get out. I don't care how much money I have to pay you as part of some sort of, some sort of severance fee. You're directly working against my interests and what I want to do with this company. And if anyone has FU money, it's Elon Musk, and he's crazy enough to use his FU money to do what he wants to do. Which, again, I think at the end of the day, that's what money can give you, is the freedom to do, it's money given to you, or sorry, money that you've earned as opposed to money that's given to you. Um, Money that you've earned kind of justifies your viewpoint in life in general, right? So if you are successful financially, uh, doing what you believe in, then why would you listen to other people? Like, I'm sure you're going to take people's advice, but if you've always kind of forged your own path, which he has done in a lot of ways, and he's been, obviously by any measure of financial success, why would I need some, $100,000, $200,000 a year political commissar working at my company trying to tell me that I'm doing the wrong thing? Get the hell out.
Well,
Go away.
and one really interesting thing about Elon, and a lot of people will kind of trash him for this, and it's fair enough to bring this up. But he has always walked this edge of being a capitalist and making a large amount of money and proving himself as a business leader, but always marrying himself very closely to government projects, right? Like he's rode the wave of electric cars and all of the incentives and benefits and write-offs and things that the government gives him there, and then obviously everything he does with SpaceX. And so he has always been, and then obviously we know with Starlink and the involvement with the Ukrainian government and everything else, he has always been very close to, in some ways, the regime, which is why so many people, including myself, are very skeptical about many of his actions. But the question is he at the end using the benefits of the system to then do his own thing, or is he at the end of the day a creature of the system? Right. And I think the answer is still we're not quite sure. And so it's interesting because, in many ways, he's very used to having this public-private partnership, this working across the public-private divide, and working with the regime and benefiting from their policies. But he also has this tension of he obviously wants to do things beyond them. He wants to go places that they won't let him go. And it feels like someone who is struggling as much as he, again, not to over labor the comparison, but the Caesarism thing really feels appropriate. Like he wants to be an optimist, but they just won't let him be an optimist, so he works with the optimists until he can't anymore, right? It feels like that's almost a part of this.
Sure. I mean,
So one, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's just it makes sense for him to give the olive branch and make an attempt to work with these people, if only to justify his position in firing them more. But it was never going to work out.
So the other part of this that I want to touch on is, of course, Twitter's relationship with the government, because we had the bombshell revelation a few days ago that the DHS and many other government entities have basically a direct line, like a hotline, a government portal to the social media sites, including Twitter, where they can like immediately request the removal and censorship of stuff. So basically, we've talked a lot about the cathedral and the decentralized organization, decentralized kind of way that these organizations sync up and work together. But we're really getting as formal as we can here now, right? Like there's an obvious and direct coordination with the government, directly with Twitter, to silence certain political voices, manipulate election results, make sure that certain media stories like the Hunter Biden laptop are disappeared until they are no longer relevant. And they are allowed to do this instantaneously. They work very closely with the social media companies. There is one communication between the government and one of these social media CEOs, or no, sorry, it was Vijaya, I believe is her last name. She was the one who was the one who pushed to get Trump removed. She was on the Joe Rogan podcast with Tim Pool talking about how Twitter censors people. And she specifically said, like, the social media companies are just going to have to get used to like working with the government, like being very cozy with the government and figuring out what to censor. And so, that should be a huge story, right? That in and of itself should be impeachable. It's a direct violation of the First Amendment. It should be the biggest story of the century. That the United States government has a backdoor into social media companies and uses those companies to directly manipulate electoral outcomes as well as other outcomes online and censor content and lie about content in order to get it removed. And so that should be like the most insane story ever, right? And by the way, we still don't know if that like we know that exists now, but we don't know that portal's been closed. In fact, it's probably still wide open, right? Like even under Elon here, like does the government still have the ability to just go to Twitter and have them censor and remove stuff? We don't know. Right there was a Jesse Kelly tweet a couple days ago talking about the likely possibility that if states aren't counting your ballots in a timely manner, they're probably doing something nefarious with them. And that tweet was immediately completely locked. You couldn't comment, you couldn't like it, you couldn't share it. The only thing you could do was quote tweet it. And it's a real question, like, did the DHS request that? Like, did Elon Musk say, yes, we will censor that on your behalf, right? We don't know. We don't know the answer to that. But what we do know is that the media sure hopes that they can, right? Because people like Bloomberg write this story, right? Twitter cuts spurn concerns about U.S. midterms human rights. What you can't see is that the actual title, that the subtitle that came up on Twitter when they linked this article was originally social media companies won't be able to monitor the election. And the question is, why is it the job of social media companies to monitor elections? Where did they gain that power? Where does that sit in the Constitution? The answer is, of course, it doesn't at all. But this is now not only something that is de facto the power of the media, it is something that they feel confident enough to write about and demand. Like, of course, not only do we all assume that the social media companies are monitoring and altering elections, but Elon Musk is dangerous because he might not let the government use social media sites to monitor and alter elections, right?
How dare you not allow us to spy on the zeitgeist?
Right. That's literally the complaint we have here.
Yeah, the man, America's really messed up. Like, she's like, yes. They're complaining because they are worried that people may have opinions that differ from what the correct opinions are. I mean, this is very 1984, but with extra steps.
Yeah, it's the extra steps that are wild, though, right? It's the filtering, and that's why it was able to creep in, right? Nobody came with jackboots. Nobody
They didn't
loaded
need
anybody
to.
onto the trains. Exactly.
No, why go through all that trouble and effort when you can just, influence all of the major media outlets? And that's why there's such a push against the diffusion of media. Right. So, obviously you've got YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, and these have become the gold standards for like the post-cable media. But it's in the best interest to destroy any sort of competing competing applications or any sort of competing company that would provide something similar to this. Obviously, there really isn't anything like YouTube. YouTube kind of has a monopoly on like videos in general.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, they all sell themselves as, and the irony of us doing this on YouTube is not lost on me, but they all sell themselves as this very much, uh, forum for the people, when in reality it's very much regulated the entire time.
Well, remember the original motto of Twitter was the free speech wing of the free speech party, right? How
Except free
far that has
speech
come.
should not be nearly as free as it used to be.
Yeah, the wrong people obviously should not have it. You have to make sure the wrong, the only the right
So
people have the freest speech.
But the wrong people are quickly becoming half the United States.
Yes, that's the you went from and that's really amazing. That basket of deplorables.
Has
Um,
really expanded.
well, and that comment was so damning for Hillary Clinton in the election, right? Like that, many people. I don't know if this is the entire story, but many people credit that comment alone with kind of her demise and her loss. It was kind of her Howard Dean Bia moment, right? Like the scream.
Sure.
I don't
I
know
remember
if
that.
I'm. How old am I? Am I dating myself by showing I remember Howard
You,
Dean his scream?
you are, but that was
Yeah.
still funny.
There's more gray than you expect, guys. But yeah, no, that was a real big moment for her. And now what she was kind of trashed for saying and possibly lost an election for saying is now something that literally every left-wing media outlet and every progressive politician says ad nauseum every day, that half the country can't be trusted with voting, can't be trusted with speech, can't be trusted with their own thoughts, can't be trusted to raise their children, right? Like this is now a very common refrain throughout the left.
It's yes. it's this is how they're burning through everything at this point, and there's a very logical conclusion to all of this, and they seem to be either blind to it or they just don't care because that's a year from now problem, or that's a 6 month from now problem, and if we're not focused on today, well then what does it matter from 6 months from now?
Yes, I'm sorry. Furious Pertinax is screaming at me from from the bowels of Twitter, reminding me that he was the other gentleman on the Twitter stream. I'm very sorry. Very sorry, Furious. You are a valuable voice. One of the Italians that reminds me of your status as people of color, and also an excellent commentator. And it is only to my incredible shame that I forgot you live on air, and you have every right to call me out on that. So apologies and thank you for your reminder there. Actually, I wanted to, before we leave this topic, because we've pretty much covered this in its entirety, but I just wanted to show this one tweet that Logan had. Logan was on here recently as well. If you guys don't follow Logan, you should definitely fix that. But he had the thoughts and prayers to every regime news outlet currently crying about losing their election censorship scheme. This is a very good tweet, but he has the goods here. The Washington Post: Twitter layoffs gutted the election information teams days before the midterms. When half of the company gone, political campaigns are gripping with anxiety over how to address election misinformation and potential threats. So yeah, we can't use Twitter to silence our enemies. That could be terrible. Musk plunges Twitter into chaos ahead of midterms. Mass layoffs swept through the company's worldwide offices, including the operations that police the information and malicious content. Um, same thing here from NBC News. You guys get the idea here, but yeah. So let's go ahead and move on to our next one. So in the vein of our sacred democracy and elections here, we know that of course, even though the government regularly colludes with places like Twitter to alter the election, our elections could be at any moment invaded and destroyed by, I don't know, voters. It would seem are the biggest danger to democracy here. So one story that has dominated the last week was the story of Paul Pelosi. For those who are not familiar, what happened with Paul Pelosi was that we don't know what happened with Paul Pelosi. That's actually the story. The real story is we don't know. So initially, what people like Politico, and again, this is mainstream left wing sources, Twitter censors. I am simply repeating what they said. They said that the police were called to the Pelosi household. Paul Pelosi, the husband of the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, the police were called to their house, and they entered the house, or they came to the door. The door was opened by a third party, and when the door was opened by a third party, they discovered Paul Pelosi and an assailant like attacking each other, possibly with hammers, maybe in underwear, right? So this is already a kind of a wild story starting out. So the initial storyline, the initial narrative that immediately hit, and every left wing source was talking about, every news channel, every politician, every commentator immediately labeled this assailant a right wing, Tucker Carlson watcher, a Trump supporter, MAGA guy who was assaulting Paul Pelosi, and this was a politically motivated hate crime that was meant to target political opponents, and was inspired and instigated by the rhetoric of the right. And the that was the story going forward. That was the immediately before we had any details, before we knew anything about anything. They were already off to the races with this. They were asking every Republican, "Do you condemn this? And if you don't condemn this, you support political violence," that kind of thing. This was immediately the way that this was framed. So then we discovered something odd, which was that the assailant was a sometimes homeless man who was obviously mentally disturbed, and intermittently spent time in a community where they regularly have like BLM flags, and they have the like like your pride, your trans pride flags streaming from everything, and they have like the in our house we believe, like just the most progressive collective community you can imagine. I mean, it's San Francisco, right? So like that's pretty much every community. But we discovered that this guy is like connected to this. So maybe this guy isn't the most radical Tucker Carlson viewer, right? Except they continue to push this, and as they push this, the media starts deleting some of its reporting. So like Politico goes back and says, actually, there weren't 3 people in the home when the police arrived. And they started calling anyone who referenced the original Politico story and suggesting that there might be something odd going on here. They start pointing out, calling those people conspiracy theorists. Then we discover that like at least four cameras are around the Pelosi household that should have like captured the entrance of this assailant or the arrival of the police. There should have been a body cam on the police officer, and none of that footage is available, right? So very odd, very very Jeffrey Epstein-esque. Like all of our cameras have failed simultaneously. Very convenient. No one's around for this. And then kind of the final, and remember, the entire time this is being pushed as like some radical Republican, some crazed, MAGA, Trump sent this guy MK Ultra style, brainwashed him and sent him in after the Pelosi household. So this is being used for political advantage the entire time. And then finally, we get a report from NBC, the Today Show, right? And they like break into their normal programming, and a reporter goes on and says that that when the police arrived to this incident, basically there was no urgency. Like Paul Pelosi did not express like distress or a need to remove the assailant immediately. In fact, according to the report by NBC originally, or the Today Show originally, they said actually Paul Pelosi moved back towards the assailant when the police entered. Like when the police came to the door and they tried to enter, the assailant did not, or the Paul Pelosi did not move towards the police for protection, but back towards the assailant. So all of this very confusing, right? None of this fits with the narrative. And then all of a sudden, this very strange report that seems to contradict everything that the mainstream media has been trying to say about this narrative, and seems to more support the kind of stuff that like Politico was reporting at the beginning. All of a sudden, they delete the tweet, they remove the video from their website, and they don't explain what happened, right? Like this is all just kinds of go away. And so we still, to this day, do not actually understand what happened at Paul Pelosi's house. But the media has been reporting, like accidentally almost reporting pieces of, like doing actual journalism, and then scrubbing them like just a few hours later from existence, calling anyone who references them a conspiracy theorist, and just pushing ahead with this idea that this kind of like crazed homeless nudist guy who lived in a collective with like BLM flags outside and was like actually trained by Trump to go in and attack Paul Pelosi, or was it either like was driven by Trump and Tucker Carlson's rhetoric to go do this. And they're using this as like a way to create fear going up to this election, right? Like they're creating this idea that actually there's just a bunch of crazed Republicans being driven by the insane right-wing rhetoric of guys like Tucker Carlson, and that is, creating a air of fear, a situation where it's very dangerous. Politics is incredible. Political violence is on the rise from the right, and it's something to be very terrified of. And so it's just very curious. I don't know, Ostrakon, if you saw any of this story, but very curious how this is developed, and how basically a story that we know nothing about and we still know nothing about is getting all these weird, different, conflicting reports that get disappeared. But the one consistent thing is that we know for sure this guy is a dangerous, radicalized right winger, and this shows that right wing political violence is endemic. And if you don't get vote for nothing but Democrats, it will the Republicans will come to your house and hammer you.
Yeah, it's obviously the facts are not fitting the narrative, but they're just destroying the facts, or memory holding the facts, and they're sticking to that narrative really hard. Mostly because it's midterm elections and they can afford to suppress it for another few days. It was 2 more days till the elections. So, just keep pumping it out there in all the media outlets, regardless of the validity of the claim. And then, sure, okay, fine. 2-3 months from now, the truth will actually come out that he was just a nut job and he had no political affiliation, or potentially a more left-wing political affiliation. But it's just a crazy dude. And crazy dudes do crazy things, like try and smash people's faces in with hammers while in their underwear. And I really don't see this as a politically motivated attack. It's just a crazy guy. But hey, let's run with that narrative for the next few days, because who cares after?
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like it seems like we've seen this a lot, that this feels like a replay of that of the Hunter Biden laptop situation, right? Like, yes, like this, we're obviously going to lie about and censor a legitimate mainstream news story in an effort to alter the election, but whatever, just flood the zone with lies long enough to get us past the election, and don't care about the consequences. Like, damn the consequences. Who cares about a reputation? The plebs can't do anything about this anyway. We'll burn our trust. We'll burn our reputation. We'll burn our institutional value at both ends, just to get across the finish line for a couple more days, secure this election, and then whatever, like at the end of the day, they're just going to have to accept it. The guy will be in, the right people will be in office, and that's all that matters. You wonder how long they can continue to run this gamut, right? It seems insanely desperate.
Yeah, it is, but they are desperate right now, because any step backwards, right? The pendulum is no longer allowed to swing left and right. And any step backwards is a major defeat, even though it isn't. But it's perceived as a major defeat. So they will hold on to every single string that they can, and they will promote any story, regardless of how ridiculous of its validity, if it pushes their party's agenda. This is where they're at. They believe themselves to be in a corner, and so therefore they are in a corner.
No, it's absolutely true. It's amazing how it's amazing how it's amazing how they've swallowed this, right? It's amazing that they've drunk their own Kool-Aid this deeply, right? That lie has been something that they've truly internalized, and that they're
But
willing. They have,
and even the
they have.
leadership has, right? This is
Yep.
not just the rank and file. Like, everyone believes that this election, and every election, is the end all be all, and there will be riots in the streets, and everything will be set on fire, and it'll turn into a Handmaid's Tale, or people will be deported. I mean, they believe their own lies so deeply that their illusions have become their reality.
It is truly amazing. It's so wild that these people who have all this power, and they inherited this machine, and they simply do not understand it, and they have they have just like you said, even the top echelon have completely bought into this, and so they don't need to go this hard. Like the Republicans were not going to do anything when they got into power anyway, and I don't think this story really changed the a lot of minds when it came to voting. So it feels like they're lighting institutional credibility on fire to secure like a lot of uh things that aren't happening. Like they're lighting their institutional credibility on fire in an attempt to manipulate an election in a way that I don't think is even going to work, to win something that I think at the end of the day wasn't even going to really
They've
unseat
already
them for power
won.
anyway. Yes, yeah, it's amazing.
That's the amazing part, right? If they've been doing it for years, they have boiled the frog slowly for years, and it has been a successful long-term campaign since the end of World War II, right? The United States has been much more liberalized, since post World War II, and they've achieved all their goals. And it's no longer enough that they achieve their goals. It is that they're not achieving their goals fast enough, and they have to keep pushing that envelope when they are not allowing the natural left and right swing that maintains their illusion of the two-party system. And everything is critical, and it is going to politically change this country in ways of which they no longer understand the rules of the game.
Absolutely. Sorry, our update. I've made another mistake. I thought Furious was reminding me he was the other person on the stream. It was not Furious. It was Lafayette Lee. My mistake. Furious was just yelling at me about Italians and whether or not they were white or people of color. So he was just correcting any assertions on the ethnicity of Italians, the ethnic nature of Italians. He was not. He was not on the stream, but thank you for that. I need to stop checking my messages. But anyway, all right.
Focus on the here and now.
Exactly.
Right now, you're with them. Right now you're with American Ostrakon,
yes.
And moonlighting with all these floozies out there. How dare you?
I'm so yeah. If you had been available, obviously, first chair. Everyone knows this. First in the hearts of the audience.
All joking aside, he was a I really enjoyed speaking with him.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and check on our last story. So the end of democracy in the title here is a bit tongue in cheek, but only a little bit here because the last part, and this ties in with all the election, all these different things, all these people freaking out about the way Elon Musk and Twitter might impact the election, and all the different things around this, the Paul Pelosi story, everything else. Here's the final part of this, right? So if you turn on any news channel besides Fox News this week, you heard about how democracy will be over if the Republicans win, right? Like not just news channels like The View, like in any place where progressive ideas dominate. It was 24/7 this message of, if the Republicans win, democracy is over. Again, fascinating. The most dangerous thing to democracy is voting, and amazing that in a two-party system, if one of the two parties wins, that's the end of democracy. So you only have a one-party system. But the rhetoric, none of this is new necessarily, but the rhetoric reached an amazing fever pitch. And like I said, this was on every news program, every Sunday talk show, like all this, it was everywhere. But the one that was particularly insane was this one here, right? It's on MSNBC, and you have this guy who's supposed to be like a historian, and he gets on there and he says, if the GOP wins, it will be the start of a brutal dictatorship. And he actually like flips out and says that like your children will be arrested and possibly killed by Republicans if they're elected, right?
Why the children? I don't get the concept here. Like, why would there be a brutal dictatorship and then the children will be arrested and conceivably killed? Like, I don't get that part.
Yeah.
Like, even it is insanity. I don't get that.
Maybe they think
what's the line of thought?
Maybe if they're like transing them, or they're like LGBT, I don't know. Maybe it's the persecution of those. I don't know. Or maybe maybe we're assigning logic where there isn't any. Right?
Yeah, fair enough.
No reason to have to do that. But it's really fascinating that this is where we are, right? I've said this before. I have a whole video on it if you guys want to go see it. It's called Democracy is Already Dead, right? And the truth is, like, the place where we're actually at, the fact about where we're actually at is that democracy is functionally over as a legitimating mechanism for governance, right? When you have a situation, which we do in the United States, where no, like, and to be fair, this is right and left. The right is just as guilty of this part, at least, as the left. There is no such thing as your opponent winning. Every election of my lifetime, basically, since I could vote, has been contested. They've all been, well, that person's not actually legitimate. George Bush didn't really win. Barack Obama didn't really win. Donald Trump didn't really win. Joe Biden didn't really win. Like, just there is no legitimate election from the other side, right? Each side immediately comes out with some reason that their opponent winning isn't real, right? Maybe votes were suppressed, or maybe there's something was messed up with mail-in ballots, or maybe someone didn't have the right birth certificate. I mean, just whatever it is, the Supreme Court decided it. Like, whatever it is, every single one of these elections is called illegitimate, and that's been a feature of our system for decades now. But now we've gotten to the point where just the act of voting for the wrong party is the end of democracy. Like, you literally have people saying, if you ever want to be able to vote again, if you don't want to be taking your kids taken away from you, and this guy talking about how they're going to be executed or something if the GOP wins, then you have to vote for the other party. And at that point, democracy is really over, right? Like, you can't ever lose an election in a scenario like that. If this is really the popular understanding of both sides, and I think it is, to be fair, like, then losing elections is no longer an option. And if losing elections is no longer an option because each election is literally like an existential crisis that could end up with you and your family gulagged or in a ditch, then democracy is over, and we're just doing elections because we don't know what else to do, right? Like, we're just going through the ghost dance, the ritual, hoping that it brings back something that is completely lost. And I think it's only going to get worse, because we are at this point two different nations. Basically, we're two different countries, at least two different countries, who have completely opposing moral systems. We see not just moral systems, but reality. We just don't see even basic reality the same way. One side says that men can become women. One side says, no, you're born and stuck that way forever, right? Like, and that's you can't, there's no way to vote that out. There's no way to bridge that gap. And so the rhetoric is only going to increase in intensity, because we just don't have the ability to turn the Leviathan of state over, in theory, even if not actually in practice, to the other team, because it's become so powerful and the differences are so wide, we can't accept any kind of loss.
Yes.
Sorry, I know that was a rant and not really a discussion, but
this is factual. But it's again, that's kind of just what we've talked about, is just there can be not one step back when it comes to when it comes to pushing their political agenda. And when you disenfranchise now a good half the country, it's a recipe for disaster. Like, and either they don't see it, I guess they don't see it, or they don't care, or they've just built this demon up in their head so much that it's just, they're willing to, right? They would be totally, if somebody asked some of these people in power now, if half the country could just disappear, anyone who disagreed with me politically is just silenced or sent away to another country, they would do it in a heartbeat, right? There can be no discourse. It's a totalitarian regime at that point, and it's not going to stop.
Yep. Nope. I think that's correct. And
It is now a one-party system with not even the illusion of two parties, because even that is too much the illusion of two parties is too much of a risk to the current power structure.
Yeah, that's the really,
and it's dangerous. It's very brittle.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's the wild thing, is they can't even they're not even capable of pretending. Like, they had a handle on this. They had containment, and they can't even pretend that the containment itself is acceptable. Total domination is the only option, and like you said, that makes the regime incredibly brittle and incredibly brutal until it breaks. So that said, we have a ton of super chats. So let's turn to the people. Let's see here. Gort for 199. Thank you very much. It's not our democracy, it's our democracy, r/democracy. Yes, it is the Reddit democracy, right? Absolutely. I think that's a pretty good encapsulation of it, right? When they say our democracy, they really are talking about the worst shitlib version of kind of democracy here. They're just, it's just their ideology with democracy, kind of glued onto the side. Let's see. Scrunchy McWaffle, thank you for your donation, sir. I am going to avoid putting that one on screen because we do like to have the channel monetized. But yes, affirmative action does in many ways feel like violinism in a codified form. That's a legal formalization of that political formula here. Let's see. Polyfrog here for $5. With Musk spinning the knee to the ADL, Twitter is dead. The cage bird is in a bigger cage. If you want freedom, check out the Fediverse. I don't know if that's a reference there, but it's yeah. I mean, it depends. Like I said, it depends on whether that was a kind of a dog and pony show for Musk. Was he trying? Will he break free of a lot of that censorship and make sure that there is more free speech, because he's kind of passing along, or he kind of used this whole thing as a justification to say, I can't work with these people, I tried, and kind of give himself a justification with kind of his investors and such? Or will he continue to try to placate these people? Actually, one thing I wanted to talk about while we're here and we're touching on this, the one interesting thing has been the new Twitter fact check, right? So obviously beforehand you had like this panel of experts and they determined what truth was. Well, they outsourced it to all these different organizations. And they can, and so like the New York Times and the CDC and all these people just like basically have the ability to veto and ban things on Twitter. And now they've got this new Birdwatch thing, which I think they're renaming, but it's basically like democratization of fact checking. And its most notable use so far has been slam dunking the White House, because the White House lied and said that they had they'd given out some kind of record payoff to Social Security, some record increase. And that was only true in the fact that like the inflation had got so bad that the mandatory cost of living increases that were put in place by, I think, like Richard Nixon had kicked in. And so technically it had been like a record increase, but only because inflation had been so incredibly high, it had been at such record levels that they were required by law to increase the amount of payments going out. And the new fact check like destroyed the White House. The White House actually ended up deleting this. So in some ways, Elon has, kind of broken that oligarchy, right? It's very, in some ways, it is very juvenalian, right? It's the low and the high versus the middle. He's using the kind of the democratization of fact checking to break the oligarchy of established fact checkers and use that to his advantage to free that. Like, do I still think at the end of the day that Elon's going to have completely free speech on Twitter? No, I don't. But I do think that is a fascinating dynamic that is going on. Let's see here. We got Line Drinker for $9.99. Says, here's some drink money today. I'm having a Blanton's and Coors banquet. Cheers. A Blanton's is a tasty bourbon. Have you had Blanton's before?
I haven't had Blanton's. It's
quite good. Yeah.
I miss my Jeremiah weed.
Man, that was long time ago, many moons.
Yeah, I miss my Jeremiah weed. What do I drink nowadays? Four Roses is okay.
Four Roses is solid.
Buffalo Trace is decent.
It's always, if you can find it anymore. It's weird. Yeah. It's not top shelf, but it's one of those that was like known as too good for its price point, and so everybody buys it up when they see it.
I like my Japanese whiskeys from time to time. The Suntory whiskeys are pretty good, but yeah. No, I need to drink some Blanton's.
Yeah, no, the wife likes that one. She grabs that whenever she can find it. So.
Fair enough.
Let's see here. We've got Skeptical Panda here for $5. Thank you very much. We get upset over Elon because he isn't a true conservative, but why don't we have an actual righty rich
Like
guy
a
doing this?
Richie Rich righty guy.
Yeah,
Is that what we're
that's
going
how I
for?
was reading it before I
Yeah,
got
Richie
got
Rich,
in today.
but on the
Yeah.
right.
Guys doing this corporate buyout activism. Yeah, I mean, Skeptical Panda, this is a great question, right? And so one thing about Caesarism, right? And I'm not saying Elon is Caesar here, but again, about the dynamic of Caesarism is that it's the non-ideological breaking through the ideological bonds. And so is Elon super conservative, a true conservative? No, he's
No,
not.
he's
And
not.
I won't want a true conservative anyway. Like I think conservatism has its own problems. But even then, like in many ways, the elevation above ideology and the ability to cut through ideology and not be sold to one ideological program is what makes someone capable of this kind of Caesar-like decision, right? They have a higher purpose, or they have a different purpose that is not ideological, and so they're not captured in ideological bonds, and that allows them to make changes other people couldn't. So why don't we have like really right-wing rich guys doing this? That might be part of it, right? Is that they because they're so bound by their ideology, they can't do some of the things that Elon's willing to do. The question also is, how many truly conservative super rich people do you have, right? Like you have like Koch brothers out there, right? But like how many, like, where is your Pat Buchanan rich guy, right? Like who's really championing
It
paleo
doesn't pay as you
conservatism?
become a millionaire as a conservative. You become a billionaire as a liberal.
It's a fair point, right? Like you have to cozy up to the regime in many ways to make that kind of thing happen, which is what we talked about with Elon in the first place.
Which he
Uh,
did, and then he went his own way. He's I'm sorry, he's a very fascinating individual. Like he is the very much the what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, the aviator. Oh my goodness, I'm totally
is
drawing a
that
blank
Howard
on it.
Hughes? Is
He's
that
a very Howard Hughes
yeah?
esque type person for our generation.
I know people love that movie. I didn't make it through the Aviator. I don't know.
I liked it.
It's been a long time, so maybe I need to go back to it.
It was decent. It had airplanes. I was happy.
Yeah, fair enough. That's
it
reasonable.
doesn't take a lot to make me happy in a movie these
Yeah,
days. It's like, wow, planes, cool.
Paul Frog here again for $5. Let's assume Elon gives me my large Twitter account back. Why would I stay there? The TOS will change eventually. I can't be banned from the Fediverse. I don't know. Maybe see, I'm out of touch. I don't know if this is an actual social media or if Paul's just having some fun here. But yeah, no, I mean it is a real concern that even if if you're someone who is interested in building a following there, the terms of service can of course be changed at any time. And this is always, as someone who is operating a fairly large social media account on Twitter that does a large amount of what I do, it is scary to put in the effort and have that kind of be that sort of Damocles always hang over you, right? Which is why these people think they can win, because they know they can pressure people and they can put people like me on the back foot with that ability. Because there are other platforms, and I've been vocal about how excited I am for what things like Gab do. But at the end of the day, let's be honest, the conversation is happening on Twitter. And we know this because like literally the government demands backdoors into it to control elections.
It is the public forum, for better
Yeah.
or worse.
In the same way that YouTube, like there are Odysseys and Rumbles and BitChutes, and you guys should, embrace those platforms as much as possible. But at the end of the day, the conversation's happening on YouTube, and for better or for worse. And that's not to disparage anybody who's forced due to censorship to be on those other platforms, because, God bless them, like they're doing the work oftentimes in places that needs to get done, and they don't have the option of doing it on large platforms. But that is just the reality, right? Like some people have to be around on these large platforms, and so that is always a concern, that those terms of service change and all of a sudden you no longer have that option. Let's see, Binary Surfer here with the comment I expected him to make, but I appreciate it, sir. $2 or £2 here. Someone broke and entered Paul Pelosi's back door. Yeah, I mean, a lot of speculation on that. If you didn't see Jason Whitlock on Tucker making quite a bit of jokes to that effect, quite hilariously. You should. That was a very hilarious performance by Jason Whitlock on Tucker there. But yeah, a lot of people have floated theories that binary might be that. The thing is, we don't know, right? And maybe you don't need to know, like, right? Like, I don't care. Like, I just don't care about Paul Pelosi, except that they've made this like some cautionary tale about right-wing violence, right? It's an obvious lie being pushed to advance this narrative right before the election. So normally, like, you just would have let the details come in. We wouldn't have rushed to conclusions. You'd be able to figure these things out, and maybe it turns out Paul, he does his own thing. They have an understanding, whatever, right? But like, we don't get to do that because the left went full court press on this, making this all about political violence and motivations and rhetoric on the right, and how you have to censor the right and you have to destroy these people because and that's dangerous. Like, that's wildly irresponsible. It's very dangerous. It raises the temperature of the whole room, and it's all based on a lie. Like, they're just burning their credibility, or maybe not even a lie. We don't know. It's all based on completely unknown information that can't be properly verified at the time, or they don't want to be verified. One of the two.
It doesn't really matter as long as it's done, right?
That seems to be their theory.
And really, what it is just there was a crazy dude with a hammer in his underwear who beat the crap out of Paul Pelosi, and it sounded like maybe he was trying to go after Nancy Pelosi. As to why, we don't know. It's weird, right? Like, he doesn't fit any sort of conservative like framework, but they'll just keep pumping it out for another 2 days because after that, it doesn't matter.
So, glow in the dark here. Stop Pelosi hammer time. Oh. Very good. Very good. That reference is now extremely old, but I appreciate it. Does anyone remember that MC Hammer had a Sunday or Saturday morning kids cartoon where he had magical dancing shoes?
No.
Yeah.
No.
This is just a fever dream of my 90s kid addled brain. But yeah,
I remember the old Super Mario Brothers show.
Oh yes. No, it was about the same time. It was this was a simultaneous event that show was on, and I think the MC Hammer battling crime with his animated dancing, like, it was one of those things where, like, he did the intro at the beginning in live action, and then he did it at the end, and in between, like, they did an animated version of him, and he fought crime with like cartoon talking dancing shoes.
So very much that same framework of like
the Mario Bros.
Yeah, where you have like the live action intro and exit, and then the rest of it's animated.
Yes, except the Mario show was just insanely embarrassing, terrible actors doing like horrific comedy skits. I mean, MC Hammer wasn't a great actor, but at least he was like a famous person of some type.
Well, the guy who played Mario, wasn't he like a professional wrestler? We're getting off a tangent here. Yeah, like,
man, I don't know.
Hold on. We can do this. Continue on, but like,
yeah, well, I'll roll.
Keep rolling on here.
Chats while you check out the Super Mario Brothers Super TV show. Sean Laffey here, just a thank you for $5. Really appreciate that. That super sticker, I think. Thank you. And then he has an actual question here for $2. Thank you. He's got a DUI. Pelosi is used to being hammered. Yeah, I mean, Paul Pelosi was famously hit with a DUI here, I think, last year. I mean, I'm trying to remember. Maybe it hasn't even been that long. Might be this year. But yes, I believe that is correct. So, yep, obvious intoxication joke there.
It was Captain in parentheses Lou Albano. And actually, I don't know if you remember the old Girls Just Want to Have Fun Cyndi Lauper video, but he also plays the dad in that, who's he's wagging his finger at Cyndi Lauper when she wants to go out.
So this is like the original Rock. Like, this is crossover star.
100%. This is the first professional wrestler to break into media.
Man, that kind of charisma, how could you contain it, right? Like,
yes, exactly. And then obviously you've got Terry Bollea was the next big one. Sorry, Terry Bollea is Hulk Hogan for those of us playing at home.
Well, you also had Sergeant Slaughter because he was in the G.I. Joe cartoon, right? Like, that was a weird thing where they took a professional wrestler and they made him a
G.I. Joe character.
G.I. Joe character. Now, I don't remember the lore well enough. Was he part of G.I. Joe before he was in the TV show, or did they?
No. I think they worked him in because he was just a professional wrestler. But yeah, so that was like the because it's kind of common nowadays to have like professional
Well,
wrestlers
let's not
go
forget Rowdy
go
Roddy Piper
Hollywood.
too, right? You
Oh,
got They Live,
that's
right?
They Live, which is a
Right.
great movie.
It's a great movie. Watched it again for the first time in a long time this year. It's really
That is
good.
some just good sci-fi right there.
Yeah, I mean, Rowdy's not the best actor, but that's a great premise.
I
It's a
mean,
great
Keith
movie.
David's in it too, so you can't be sad.
Well, the great thing about the aliens in They Live is that they're actually like more benevolent than our current ruling elites, right? Like the messages they're putting in everything are like, get married, have children, go to
Right.
work, go to church. Like they're like the
I've-
evil messages of your alien overlords were like far more benevolent than our
It's like,
current.
breed and be fruitful so, we can continue this.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
that's the funny thing is like if you actually cared about a population, even if it was only as cattle, you would at least still tell them to do these basic things, right? You wouldn't tell them to have their children, mutilated by surgeons. Like so, yeah, amazing that even evil alien overlords are better than our current ruling class.
and they were supposed to be the evil alien
Yeah,
overlords in that movie.
yeah. Can we get those guys? Can we, if we have to be ruled by
They,
someone, can we tag those in?
I mean, they seem all right. Like,
Yeah, it's just-
everyone just don't put the sunglasses on and you'll be
yeah,
fine.
yeah. Don't do that. Don't see
That
their
is
actual
an
faces.
epic fight scene. It is so just go the fight scene between Roddy Piper and Keith David, which just keeps going. And like he's like put the glasses on, and it's a
Yep.
good 5-minute long fight
It
scene
is.
where they
No,
they fall over and they get exhausted, and then
my,
they just
my
start.
wife was watching. Is like, is this gonna end? She's
No,
just like,
no,
like,
it doesn't.
No, it's not.
God, 80s cinema was just 80s and early 90s. Just it's so much better, and 70s
Yeah.
movies were made by people who had a vision.
Yes,
And
rather
it's just
than corporations that were sitting in a room workshopping the next Marvel
when are,
thing. Yeah.
when are we going to get the critical drinker on to have a talk? Because I really
Yeah,
want
you've been pushing that. I'll reach out. I'll see.
push
I don't
that
think he.
for, like,
I don't think he follows
years.
me on Twitter, but I'll see. He's a funny guy. He's got. An excellent channel.
I'm a bit of a critical drinker fanboy.
Yeah.
I want to be I want to talk to him.
We'll see if we can't get him in here and have you like sign your stuff and
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I apologize, audience. We've gone on tangents about Roddy Piper and Lou Albano here, but yes. Long story short, there was an MC Hammer TV show, and there was also a Super Mario show, and Lou Albano was also the dad in the music video for Cyndi Lauper. Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That's all I was trying to say on this.
I'm glad we finally made our way through all that. All right. All right.
Moving back to politics.
The most serious news stream you can imagine. All right. So, conquest theory for $5 with Twitter. The risk of having just one piece out of place really does have the regime worried. It needs to know its tentacles in everything. That's true. Like so you're right, conquest theory, that like just having one piece of the consensus making apparatus with a really built-in user base is a problem. But remember, it's not just one piece. Twitter is a very specific piece. You have to understand, and as a recovering journalist, I feel this. So I speak to this as an addict, a recovering addict, right? Like you have to understand what Twitter does to like it is perfectly designed to target the dopamine receptors of journalists. It's
everything they want.
It is everything they want, right? It is everything they want. It is the adulation. It is the ability to look very clever, and the way it is designed. The constraints on the posting are particularly designed for the kind of people who write headlines and like sting and like and hype a couple sentences. Like it is designed in a lab for the kind of people who now like run your country for better or for worse. And so this isn't just,
and then they can silence the people that disagree with them and
exactly
not have to listen to them.
Exactly. They used to own this place, right? Like this was their playground. It was their domain, and they ruled it as they see fit. And now they're trapped in there with us, right? Like now I posted the picture of Bane like holding the back of the guy's head. Do you feel in charge? That's their situation now. And so you're right in that just having one piece of the puzzle is in itself driving them nuts. But even more importantly, it's the type of piece it is. It's their playground. It's their thing. It's what validates their skills and their mastery in a very direct way. and they're terrified to have the wrong people in charge of it. Let's see here. We had Peter R for $5 regarding your theory of on the martial class using military to join the elite. This may explain the constant push for women and trans in the military.
Oh, it
Yeah, I think
does. Yes, of course it
100%.
does.
Yes, but it not only does it weaken the military, which is again like even if they would never say this out loud. Understand, like even in their back in like the smokiest of backfilled rooms, these people would never say out loud to themselves and to each other, we are specifically going out of our way to weaken the military, but it is incentivized, right? It is what they want. And on top of that, they are also stacking, they're doing the Leninism, right? Biolinism. They're stacking people who would not normally be able to participate or be function in like a martial elite. They are stacking the highest echelons of the military with these people, and that's a very specific and direct tactic. That's all purposeful. You're definitely hitting on truth there. I don't know if you had more, Ostrakon. That is certainly, we've said it all
Yeah,
before. But
we have entire discussions about this.
yeah.
Like I think our first four like deep dives and our first four discussions like that we ever had were specifically about the changing United States military and it's how it's being turned into something as a political tool and not a tool for national defense. It's just another. I mean, it's great if it can be used to project power overseas, but that's secondary to ensuring its loyalty.
So glow in the dark here for $5. I disagree that they got everything they wanted, except certain things like single pair, and Utopia isn't here. They need to push harder in their minds.
Oh,
So
I haven't said they've gotten everything they've wanted. I'm saying they are getting everything that they want eventually, but it's
mhm.
not happening fast enough. No, they're not.
Yes.
They don't have it all yet. I disagree with that. They haven't gotten everything, but they're getting it.
Well, and Ostrakon, you bring in an important point there, a key phrase, the not yet, not fast enough, right? And I talked about this. If you guys want to check it out, I talked about it in one of my videos on the managerial elite, right? Sam Francis in Leviathan His Enemies talks about this disconnection of the left, right? Many people look at the managerial elite and radical progressives and they say these people are different, like they're on different sides, right? Because the radical left wanted insane changes, and the managerial elite were running like corporations and government agencies, and they were pushing back against each other. But he said that's a false dichotomy, because what you're not recognizing is that, well, there's that the end goals of the managerial elite and the progressive radicals are the same, and the tension you're recognizing is not two different sides who have entirely different goals fighting against each other. What you're looking at is the more radical edge trying to push the managerial elite to the goals that they claim they want faster. And they're saying, and the managerial elite, at least they used to be smart enough to say, we can't go this fast, we'll break the system, you got to slow down, you got to wait for people to adjust, we have to boil the frog slow enough so that it doesn't jump out of the pot. And the entire time the progressives were screaming, and that's the kind of the value of this kind of false dialectic, right? It shifts people to the left because you think there's opposition when there isn't, right? You think people who are opposed to the radical left aren't actually, they actually aren't opposed to them at all. They're just going at a slower rate, a more methodical and more reasonable rate that will allow them to kind of reach the goals that they want eventually, but not destroy the system in the time. So that key phrase there is not moving fast enough, I think is the accurate one. They are all moving the same direction, but there are the more mainstream, more in charge managerial regime wants to go slower. The radical progressives want to bring it about faster, but we're seeing more and more that the whole apparatus is now moving towards the more radical side. They no longer have the self-control to say, wait, we need to do this slowly, we need to do this methodically, we need to do this carefully. We don't want to kill the goose, we want the golden eggs. They can't do that anymore.
The goal is to not skin. The goal is to fleece the sheep, not skin it.
Yes, you want to shear it, you don't want to kill it. Yeah, exactly.
and this goes, what did we call it? The dark Brandon speech, where it's Joe Biden giving this speech, in this very ominous blood red tones. It's a State of the Union address,
Yeah.
and that State of the Union address is a clear indication that we're no longer being run by competent liberals who
Hmm.
understand that the frog must be boiled slowly. It's literally it was the rank and file of 30 years ago, uh, educating the new generation of liberals who are now in charge, and they truly believe that if they do not win everything all the time, it's going to be the end of the world. Right? It was there was always that the acknowledging that power had to be shared for the good of the nation was always in place with previous generations, right? It was at least the conservatives and the right were considered like a necessary evil in order to maintain a functioning state. They always had a smaller place at the table, but they always had their place at the table, and that was enough. And now it's considered, because everything's framed as this moral argument, it's considered evil or immoral to allow any opinions that differ from theirs. They can't
Yeah.
have any alternate power at the table.
And I just want to clarify, you were saying it was like a State of the Union address. It wasn't his
It
actual
wasn't
speech.
it wasn't a stadium. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah. No,
I don't
it's
know.
the
It looked he listen. He was drenched in blood red, surrounded by
yeah.
Marine Corps guards, and looking very
Yeah.
ominous, and accusing half the country of being evil.
Yes.
So
That is an accurate description there. All right, so Peter here for 20 Canadian. I don't know. Is that real money anymore? Is that it might be worth more than the British pound actually as we're
yeah,
going. So the way
one
it's
could only hope.
yeah. So Peter here, thank you very much for your donation. Sorry for mocking your currency. If the right people don't have power, do you know what happens? The wrong people get it. And yeah, that's obviously true. I don't know if you mean that tongue in cheek, kind of mocking the Democrats, but I think that is it is the case, right? And that's the thing that the right has had such a hard time with. That's why I did the sign tapping of the team that wants to win always beats the side that wants to be left alone, right? And if you are not in power protecting your values, your culture, inculcating those things, moving them forward the future, someone else will be doing that with their values, their culture, that kind of thing. And so no matter how anyone feels about that statement, it's 100% right, and you have to deal with the consequences of that statement, live accordingly. Lying to yourself about reality only ends up making you look foolish and hurting the people around you. Let's see here. Cheesy Alfredo for $20. Asians only got wrapped up in the admissions discrimination. The heart of all discrimination is anti-white. There's nothing else about it. No one cares about conservative arguments. It's anti-white and fight the centers there. So yeah, I mean, obviously the majority of people who are subject to this are white people, and the practice is definitely geared to be anti-white, right? But like I said, the reason that the Supreme Court case is interesting is whether you agree with the formulation of affirmative action or not. And obviously, I disagree with it. But whether you agree with that formulation or not, the answer the has always been, the argument has always been from the left that even if you are holding down one race in order to advance another, which is supposed to be exactly against what the country is supposed to be about, or at least that's the narrative that's been pushed for the last 50, 60 years. If that's the case, then it's the justification has always been, well, there was this historical bad treatment of African Americans and other groups by whites, and so that's what justifies them being held down for the elevation of these other groups because they deserve it. They were given this hand up the entire time, and now another group has to be given a hand up, and they need to be held down in order to again, whether you believe in the story or not, that has been the story, that has been the narrative, that has been the justification. And so the targeting of Asian students when it comes to these programs just breaks that narrative in half, because these people are supposed to be part of the people of color coalition, and they are being targeted for discrimination by affirmative action in the way that usually is only reserved for white people. And so that is why it's interesting. It's not saying this is supposed to be about one race or another here. It's simply pointing out that the focus of the Supreme Court case and the fact that Harvard has and other universities have specifically targeted Asian students for discrimination because they produce higher SAT scores clashes so severely and so obviously with the narrative that it is very jarring. I'm not saying that it breaks some people necessarily, but there are many people who are jarred out of that by looking at a very simple fact that contradicts kind of the justifying narrative they've been sold on affirmative action. Let's see here. Let's see. Richivern, I think is the name here. So number one, thank you for your donation, by the way, $20. I appreciate it very much. Affirmative action, does it lead to race war? I think is kind of what we're asking there. 2, I'm Black and I stand by the statement, the Equal Protection Clause and its consequences have been a disaster for the American people. Equal protection is ever evolving. So to answer number one, hopefully not, right? Like, I mean, really, I mean,
but it's not about race. It's about class. It's never been about race.
Well, I don't know that that's
I mean,
true.
It's race is a component of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, when it fits the narrative, you know, if you're a white Mexican, right? If you're
that's very true. You become a what was it? George Zimmerman becomes the white Hispanic.
Becomes the white Hispanic when it fits their need.
Yeah, and Thomas Sowell becomes not a real Black man because he disagrees with
right. So it's
Clarence Thomas. Yeah,
sure, exactly. So it's about race when it benefits them, and it's about class when it doesn't. And it's really, I really, in my heart of hearts, I really believe it's more about class than race.
So I think, you know, and I've talked about this dynamic before, which you have to remember for the people who created this system is that they are separating themselves when they talk about like the evilness of whiteness or whatever, when you see all these insane like Rwanda radio type talking points from people like on MSNBC and these articles where, you know, the evil of whiteness, the problem of whiteness, blah, blah, blah. Oftentimes these things are written by white people, and they're written because these people are trying to separate themselves, right? They don't see themselves as part of it. What they're trying to say is the lower class, the middle class, the unwashed masses. But at the same time, I do shy away from saying it's just class and it's not race, because these people are specifically targeting race for a reason. Like they do have a specific narrative. They do have what is functionally a blood libel against white people when it comes to your very skin color is a problem. It is original sin, and you are responsible because you were born into a specific skin color for all the evil in society. Like, you can't pretend that's a class issue, even if the people doing it are enforcing it based, I think, largely on kind of the class dynamic you're pointing out. I think that is valid. It is difficult to say it's only that, because these people have spun a narrative that is entirely based in some kind of really racial blood libel, and it's gross, it's ugly, and it's horrible that that our education system and these media outlets are creating racial division by repeating this kind of stuff to innocent like kids on a regular basis. It's just horrific. So the answer is hopefully it doesn't lead to that at all, but I think the media gins it up like they want it to, right? Like that they really are doing the Rwanda radio thing. They are trying to push people into this space, and it's terrifying. And unfortunately sometimes it works, and these people are horrible for doing it, and they need to stop it immediately, because if they don't, things can get very bad very quickly and people won't remember why. But that said, number two, there's obviously a huge problem with the structure of civil rights law in general in the United States. It's created, and I've done a video on this. Sorry to keep referencing my prior work, but I do. The one about the reviewing Chris Caldwell's book which everyone needs to read immediately if you haven't read it. Well, now I won't be able to remember the name of the book.
Keep talking. Let me.
Chris Caldwell. Anyway,
Yeah.
I only talked about it ad nauseum, but he talks about how basically the civil rights movement and civil rights law have created a second constitution, and that the most important thing in America today is having access to that second constitution, which is why everything, be it the first like gay marriage and then trans issues and all this stuff, immediately has to become the new civil rights movement because that allows them
The
to
Age of
hack.
Entitlement.
Thank you. Yes, Age of Entitlement. It allows them to hack the actual Constitution and build like this side path by which they can kind of advance agendas outside of the normal laws of the United States. So let's see our next one here. Thank you for doing the Googling there. One's compliment for two Canadian. Tho interview was great. Hit up Dave Smith. Yeah, no, Tho was great. He's a great guy, very knowledgeable. Works with the Mises Institute. Make sure to check him out. I've had a lot of people tell me Dave Smith. You got to talk to Dave Smith. Dave Smith. I'd love to tell Dave Smith to get in contact with me. I don't think he follows me on Twitter. I don't really have a way to contact him. I don't really know a lot about Dave Smith other than he's a libertarian, like comedian guy who's pretty famous. And people constantly tell me I need to talk to him. I'm on board. I'm open to the discussion. I don't have a way to. So if you can get Dave Smith to hit me up, that'd be great because right now I don't have a direct channel of communication to him. But I'm more than happy to have any discussion with him if someone can make that happen. Let's see. Glow in the dark here again for $10. Thank you very much. Something to think about. Do you think wokeness maybe cover for USA to use more PMCs in Afghanistan? PMC where 1 in 10 troops and I think is only increased. It provides deniability and kind of hide a budget. That's actually a really interesting question. So Ostrakon, what do you think about this theory? So if we make the military as woke and kind of unusable as possible, that then requires us to hire more and more PMCs that can hire the people who have been pushed out of the military for not being woke enough or not following in the demographics.
Because this is
now
you're softballing me one, aren't you?
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll keep this up for you.
So that's what's called mercenaries. And as a general rule of thumb, it's never a great idea to place your hard power as a nation within the hands of somebody whose primary motivation is money. This seems, while yes, of course, you can use mercenaries as a supplemental force to any military. It's been done throughout history. It's a really, really terrible idea to place the majority of your hard power in the hands of people whose primary loyalty may or may not be to the United States. Or even if it is to the United States, their motivations for being there are not military service, but rather a paycheck. This seems a very dangerous combination. And as far as deniability, there's it's called special forces for a reason. There's plenty of deniability built in within that organization if you need to use them for asymmetric warfare. So I don't think it's something they're really thinking about. I mean, these are the people. I don't think they really think much about the military at all, other than whether or not it's meeting the needs of the regime. So I think it's very much something that they're disinterested in a lot of ways. They've shown an interest in the sense that they've shown the same interest in universities, right? They very much understand the concept that if you control the education of the people who go into these systems, be they universities or the military, you're going to produce people who are more loyal to you, and not just loyal to the country, but also loyal to your agenda. But as far as do you think wokeness may cover the USA to use more PMCs? No, not really, honestly. They would just use more private military companies if they wanted to, but they're expensive. It's not the sinews, the finances are not infinite as much as they'd like to believe they are. And and they're also placing money and power in people of which they inherently dislike and distrust. So they keep them under a relatively short leash. They are there to do the dirty jobs, but they also don't want them anywhere near their levers of power.
Yeah,
Exactly the kind of people they don't want near them.
it's just interesting. Yeah, you're probably right, and you're more familiar with, of course, this dynamic than most. But I do find it fascinating the concept of them pushing all the competent people out of the military so they can kind of wokeify it, and then hiring those people back as employees of the PMCs that are allowed to employ them because they don't have to conform to the wokeness to the same
Well,
degree.
they're competent.
Right.
and
Right.
and at the end of the day, there are certain jobs. This is a lot like, doctors or firemen or certain hard skill jobs like like physicists or things like this where regardless of that person's political opinion, the job of which they do is inherently important. Right?
Yep.
These are not jobs you can mess around with and still have a functioning country. And so, therefore, they begrudgingly allow these people on the peripheral of the military to
Hmm.
do the dirty jobs that they can't be bothered with because they have to get done at the end of the day. But it's they're very much treated like garbage men. Yes, we want you to do the function, but we need you to shut up. We don't want your opinion, and we want you as far away from us as possible.
Yep. All right, here we've got EJ Moreno to 270 for $5. Well, to be fair and balanced to Paul Pelosi, another fact of the case is that he did get hit with a hammer. I see, corrected that. Okay, so yeah, he did get hit with a hammer. Okay, yeah, I mean that's fair, right? Like maybe his erratic behavior is based on the fact that he was hit with a hammer. Yeah, like that's a totally reasonable point. I guess again the point of it is what we don't have is a lot of facts. So there were, to be fair, lots of conservatives who were over speculating on what this meant, right? And it's fair to point out that they were taking this and going to all kinds of wild places with it without having enough information. But at the same time, you invite that when you push a event that you have basically not enough information on, and you push that as a definitive example of political violence that undercuts like all the authority and moral authority of like Republicans, and it proves that the GOP is extremely dangerous and that all these conservative media voices need to be silenced. Like the problem is with the hyper politicalization of the event, the actual facts of the event become irrelevant, right? So and people on both sides make wild claims. So yeah, you're right. Like that is a fair point, of course, and maybe his behavior is erratic in that situation due to the injuries sustained during that situation. But again, because no one, right or left, had enough information on this, the answer should have been wait and see and get the actual facts. But instead, the most important thing was for the left to get out as fast as possible with a specific political narrative, flood the zone, make sure no one could think anything else, and accuse everyone of conspiracy theories, whether they were making wild accusations or not, and then leave everyone on the right to kind of twist and play defense like they always do when something like this happens. All right, let's see. Paul Frog here again for $5. Just want to say I agree with your takes on Twitter and Musk. Also, is glad to see you on the progress report with iHypocrite. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate that. And yeah, for anyone who didn't see that, I was over on iHypocrite's channel. iHypocrite, like legendary Twitter account, was honored to be invited over there. That was great, and had a fun time talking with him. Oh man, we've had a lot more super chats come in. Okay, sorry, just trying to keep. Thank you, everyone. I was just trying to keep track of everything. But yeah, it was great. So make sure you go over to his channel and check out that stream. He does like a clip show where we all react to different things in the news and different clips and stuff. So that was a lot of fun here. So I appreciate that. Let's see. Sean Laffey here for $5. Are we sure that it's a mistake that they're threatening to use and currently using hard power? Or are they just that assured in their total victory? So, yeah, Sean, like, so to be clear, there is always the possibility, right? There is always the possibility that they actually pull this off. You can't really completely discount the idea that these people have all the power. They're forcing this stuff because they have the ability to do it, and they will do it. But I think if you're just you don't I don't think it's cope to look at what's going on and the fact that these people just can't control most of the narrative at this point anymore, that they can't bring about like the material abundance that they used to, that they can't manage the machine with the efficiency that they used to. I don't think it's cope to look at what they're doing and say this is going to fall apart, right? Especially as they start to try to use hard power and they use it in an even more embarrassing way. Like, could they eventually win and crush everyone? It's possible, right? It would be foolish to completely discount that possibility. But I honestly don't think it's the case. I think that things will come apart before they will have total victory. That would be if you ask me to put my money somewhere. That's as I'm a notorious black pillar. But if you want me to give my best white pills, it's that these people simply aren't competent to reign enough to reign forever. I really don't think they are. At the end of the day, I don't think they know how to use hard power. I don't think they know how to really close that deal at the end of the day and make that transition. And I think they will stumble in the attempt. Scrutchy McDump Waffle for 499. Thank you very much. When you say transcend ideology, I think you mean a guy with enough power to say because I said so and then ask why. Yeah, for sure. Like, obviously what you need for like this Gordian knot solution, right? Just cutting through everything is the kind of power to just say, I don't need to justify myself through ideology. I am not beholden to these previous regimes' levers of power, which allows me to approach issues that otherwise seem unsolvable because I can use tools that were previously off limits, right? So that's what I mean by transcend ideology. One of the things we have, like one of the reasons that our politics has seemed to go nowhere, is that we've had both sides so locked into kind of like really unhealthy and false ideologies that no one is able to actually think about the good of the people. And that's why, like, in many ways, Donald Trump was such a disruptor because, again, Donald Trump was not ideological. Say what you want about Donald Trump. He has many faults, many flaws, but he was not ideological. He's not your standard issue conservative. So he would just say things like, yeah, I'm going to close the border. And yeah, I'm going to like put tariffs on stuff and protect your trade from China. And he'll even go as far as say like, yeah, I'll ban Muslims if I think it'll help. Like, he will just go out there and say things that are so outside the mainstream political ideology and the Overton window that he creates a situation where everyone is reacting to him. Right. And even though Trump wasn't the guy, and Trump isn't the guy who totally gets to transcend ideology and change things, he is a foreshadowing of that ability. And it's the same thing that's true of Musk. Even though Musk probably isn't the guy, Musk shows you a possible future and a possible solution on the way out. And it is that ability to transcend ideology, which means that the guy who ends up fixing this probably won't be the true red conservative or the true blue progressive, right? They will probably have something that moves kind of beyond both of those paradigms. Let's see here. Gort, would you ever go on BAP's podcast if invited? I mean, to be clear, like when BAP was on Twitter in his original form, BAP was one of the first people who retweeted me, who had a large account. He did so often. So I mean, yeah, like I'm very grateful for that. And if BAP had that, who knows? I don't know. I don't really communicate with him. I don't know what that scenario would be like, but yeah, I mean, obviously someone who I've interacted with before and was someone who helped me early on when no one was paying attention to who I was. So definitely appreciative of that. But I have no idea if he has any intentions with the show, that kind of thing. Matty House here for $10. Thank you very much. Shout out to those with live family and friends who won't look into anything you say and yet still consider themselves more informed because of osmosis due to master's degree or browsing Reddit. I mean, yeah, that's absolutely the case, right? Like, there's a lot of that. And you know, you've got to, right? Like that's what the authoritative sources thing is all about, right? It's limiting the kind of people who can speak into something, right? So when you these people think what they think for a reason, right? They have the internal logic of the system works for them, right? Like everyone who has high status and who's thought of as professional and mainstream has the kind of credentials I have, right? Why would I listen to anyone who doesn't have those kind of credentials when I could listen to the people who do? So it creates itself like its own justification of an echo chamber works for them and makes total sense in their reality, because why would you go anywhere else? So that is very difficult for people who are trying to kind of bring anything else. And there are people who will see those stark differences and will change their mind, but at the end of the day, those people are fewer and further between than I think most of us would hope. Sorry, Ostrakon, I'm not trying to talk over you here. I'm just kind of blowing through super chats. If you have anything to say, feel free to
No,
jump in.
no, go for it. Go for it. I don't. Not for this.
Okay, no, fair enough. All right, I just want to make sure I wasn't talking over you here. Winston Fujimori here. Twitter is never going to be like it used to be. Gab is a boobercon and low IQ. Graper echo chamber and Torba sucks. The Fediverse is the only solution. Get on. Again, I don't know anything about these different the Fediverse. If I guess it is a real social media thing. I just don't know anything about it. Like I said, I like what Torba is doing when it comes to his ability to separate himself from like the infrastructure of the regime as much as possible. I think that's a fascinating thing, and I think it's whatever you feel about Torba or his ideology or his style personally, I think that is very valuable. And I think it's really important to recognize when people are making significant contributions, even if they're not exactly the ideological voice that you like. You are right that Twitter is never going to be like it was. That part you are right about. So let's see. Life of Brian here for $4.99. Thank you. The left needs to be hysterical because because they lack the moral vocabulary to express its true ethos of credentialist institutional autocracy. Yeah, I mean that's true. That's absolutely right. They don't. In many ways they don't understand the system they're operating. They haven't internalized the nature of their rule mechanically. They kind of just have the noble lie, and they've invested entirely in it. They're repeating it, as Ostrakon has pointed out. At this point, it's amazing how high up there are. You expect the people at the top to know better, right? To have a true understanding, a true mechanical grasp of how things are working, and they're playing the people below like puppets. You don't expect the people near the top to be vomiting out this kind of stuff
The same
actually
thing.
believing it, right? But they do, and it's wild. It's absolutely wild. All right, let's see. Cheesy Alfredo here for $20. Thank you very much. These people blood level whites because the system gives incentive to, but who is setting the narrative? Assume the system is mostly Amish. Yes. So you're right that the system does incentivize people to do this, right? I think that is indeed the case. We can have a lot of discussions as to why that is, but I think that is the reason that people are setting it up that direction. I think it's more about a power dynamic that allows, again, that kind of that low, high versus middle. I think it allows people to separate themselves and allows them to kind of use the periphery to separate and generate power for them. I know there are people who have other theories, but that is mine. So let's see. Glow in the dark here for $5. It says, we have USA mercs fighting each other in Libya. Reminds me of the Renaissance. It also happens in Syria. I don't know. Is that true, Ostrakon? Mercenaries employed by the USA on both sides?
Yeah, I don't know. Now we're getting into maybe potentially conspiracy theory, potentially not. No comment. I don't know enough of my history to answer this question.
And that's fine, right? Like, yeah, we're we don't want to comment on things we just simply don't know. You might be right, it might be wrong. We just simply don't know enough about it. So
yes, maybe, maybe
right.
not.
Fair enough.
Now we're getting into I don't know. I
It's
just don't know.
sometimes I don't know is a good answer. Better to speak in your wheelhouse and stand confidently on what you know than there are plenty of people out there who will just talk directly out their butt, and that'll destroy your credibility. So just talk as much from where you know, and that's fine. Glow in the dark here for $10. They're making opponents disposable if they join merc groups and can cut them loose if they get too uppity.
Sure, but
Yeah,
that's the problem. Now you've
right.
got angry people you've cut off who are, custodians of your hard power. This is bad.
Well, and he says at the next part here, I won't put it past these people to be dumb enough to outsource their military,
No,
right?
no,
So
I wouldn't
he's
either,
agreeing
but
with you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, and Machiavelli said the same thing, right? Like there are many thinkers and said the same thing. Machiavelli said that if you're a nation that is outsourcing its military entirely to mercenaries, you're putting yourself like they'll turn on you the minute that they don't have pay. You can't, in the end, trust these people. He brings all kinds of historical examples, especially with kind of the different Italian princes and stuff. So this is nothing new. This is something that has been noticed many times throughout history, and as we know, history repeats over and over and over and over. Let's see. The gay rascal for sorry, I don't, is that euros? I don't give a damn about marriage. I'm Catholic. Marriage is not for me. I want legal security for my partnership. That was the goal for decades. Okay. We didn't really talk about that subject, but I appreciate you bringing that perspective in there at the end. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and say thank you to a few people who make this stream possible. First and foremost, of course, to all you guys who were donating on the stream with your super chats. We really appreciate it. Had a lot of great and insightful questions there. I want to thank people like I think you'd pronounce it Aristoteles. I'm trying to say that correctly. Sorry, I don't have the name up on the screen, so you guys can't see it. Valuable OX, or I think he said it's Valuable Ox. Valuable Ox. Appreciate your support there. Of course, we have people like Easter Worshipper. We have people like user F1F00C09. We have AWXYZ. We have Santa. That's right. Big man, always here to support the stream. We greatly appreciate his efforts. Hope you're doing well. I know your time is coming very soon here. Jonathan Anomaly here. Appreciate your support as well. And I think that's everybody. Yep, we're good. All right, guys. So, yep, want to say thank you again. And of course, always grateful to have American Ostrakon, everyone's favorite co-host here.
You're very welcome. Sorry, I'm waiting for that delay.
No problem. Yeah, no, I hear you. The rubber banding thing with the audio. Like I said, hopefully internet fixed here very soon, guys. Next week, hopefully I'll have the fanciest of internets and we don't have to worry about this anymore. But I appreciate you hanging with me through all of it. All right, guys, have a good one. If this is your first time here, please make sure to subscribe. Check out the Substack if you haven't. All the other links for Odyssey, Rumble, all that stuff down below. The stream goes over to those immediately after it's done. So if you prefer to watch on those platforms, you always have it there as well. Thanks for watching, guys. And as always, we'll talk to you next time.